I'm still waking up, but I wanted to hit record. I got back from Mexico City like 5 or 6 days ago. I'd kind of known him, but I like became better friends with a guy named Dennis, and he just does a ton of YouTubes. And one of the things I liked, he was like, he listens to some of our podcasts. He liked the authenticity level, and he's like, you could try just even editing less. And I was like, you know what? I might try a couple episodes like that, or just starting sooner. And then he also said, hey, can I give you another thought? And I was like, well, he's like, why not do an episode where you talk about doing the podcast? I feel he's been into YouTube for so long, and I think maybe he's followed a lot of people on YouTube and kind of picks up on some of the same stuff that you see, which is everything's post edit, everything's like perfectly polished and then published, right?
Mhm.
So I was like, oh yeah, well, I feel like Andrew and I could like for sure just get on and like talk openly and like in an imperfect way about what we've thought about this like probably 14-15 hour project. I'm gonna guess, at least, if that's just on the recording side. And on the editing side, it turned out to be more than I expected it to be. And now on the social media side, but like on all of it. And I was like, I want to do that. So Dennis, if you end up watching this, shout out to you. And I don't have like an actual set itinerary. I just kind of want to know how you feel, 12 or 13 episodes in. And I want to share how I feel too. So talk to me, dude. What do you think? What do you think of this thing that we've done together?
Man, it's incredible. I think the one through line that connects every episode to me is the level of curiosity that we both approached each episode with, and where that led the conversation. I found to be not just refreshing and not just like deeply fulfilling, but it's made me look at things in my day-to-day life much differently. I
Hey.
mean, everything from the way Pranab was talking about, self-help and healing, to Nabras letting herself just like let her body tell her when she's ready to move and when she's ready to be comfortable somewhere, to Rich talking about dedicating his life to helping those that other people have forgotten. There's so many powerful messages that have come from this with no intention of like, I don't think we set out to like put some big flag in the ground and make some claim about who we are, who we want to be, or what we're trying to do with this. It was just literally curiosity and storytelling. And it's impacted a ton. I can't believe how much from these conversations that I've actually brought up in therapy, that I've talked to friends about. I mean,
Hey,
yeah,
cool.
it's incredible, man. I'm very, very happy that we're doing this, and I don't have a single, looking back at it, I don't think I have a single thing that I would change about the stories that we've been able to embark on with all of our guests.
See, the best part about this is just that you and I both can like look at each other and be like, "Cool, let's do a season 2," and we both want to do one.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, think
yeah,
about the amount of times so when we first started, right? Which I think is the fun of this episode, is to talk about some of the things that were going behind the scenes. When we first started, we're like reading articles. It was like the average podcast like doesn't get past 7 episodes, doesn't get released consistently, doesn't really know what it is. There's all these things that, you and I are about preparation. I've learned enough about you to realize you're a very prepared person, and I'm a very prepared person. And that being said, though, a lot of these great episodes that we went into, I fought against that like kind of somewhat neurotic voice sometimes that wants to be ultra prepared. And we would just kind of like, what? If we were going to dinner with Rich, we wouldn't bring an itinerary with us,
right.
And who knows, maybe we'll do that in the future for certain guests. But I think it worked out really well. I liked, even now, a former professor of mine just came out with a book. She's already won a Pulitzer, and this is a new book, and it's like right up my alley. It's about like American evangelicism. Like, it's super interesting to me. And the book came in, and she's offered to record with us. And I was like, this is another interesting test, right? Because she's been doing like the media junket and all these talks with people, and it's been like, what'd you think of the book? Let me talk more about the book. I'm here to press the book. And I don't even mean that, and like that's just like what you do. She's like an
Yeah,
incredible person. She's not like all like, oh my god, everybody buy my book. And I was like, that is something else that's interesting to me, is that you and I want to feel more like we're having dinner with her. And of course, we're probably going to talk about her book, because she just spent the last 2 or 3 years working on this thing that's really close to her, and it just came out. but we're not on a radio show telling everybody to go to elizagriswold.com and hit us with your 3 reasons why this should be the book I read this year. Instead, we're capturing for ourselves and for the people that we love that tune in as well, just that magic of human connection. So that's one thing. We don't really have prepared stuff. I want to know at least somewhat about the guest if you don't. That I could go in, like directions, but I feel that same way for dinner. I don't sit down and write stuff down. I don't think a ton, but I think enough before I go to dinner with somebody and bringing people of some of the things we might have in common or some things I want to know more about, because I feel heat there. Like I feel like I naturally do want to know more about something. And I think that we stumbled upon that when we were first starting to do this. We were like, it would be nice if every time whoever the guest was, that both of us were not like an expert in whatever they were coming in on. At least one of us, if both of us are not experts, that would be really great. And I don't know how you felt about that. I felt pretty great about that formula.
Yeah, I don't think there was ever a moment that we got too far in the weeds about any given topic where one of us didn't have, be it the audience in mind or be it somebody who maybe not in the fold, had them in mind. So we could actually just look at it and say, hey, maybe we need to put a little bit more light on here. Let's shine a little bit more light on this topic. Let's dive in a little bit deeper. We don't have this agenda, like you said, but that's what I really enjoy about these conversations, is that it's open-ended questions, and we could kind of, decide where we want to go, navigate sort of in the moment, and not let the script sort of, keep these guardrails up that we don't need. But yeah, I don't like preparation, in the sense of what we're doing here. In other
Right.
aspects of my life, I have to have it. Um, but I did think about something, and this kind of ties into a text message that you and I had, and then what you had written about Mexico, which is, like having healthy boundaries and being open and honest and talking to people about certain things. And when you just said about going to dinner, it's like, I don't want to be prepared. I'm not taking notes. I'm not doing these things at the dinner table, but I want to have an understanding of who I'm eating dinner with so we can prepare the conversation, or at least sort of be on the right track and not sort of start with with being completely out of left field.
Right.
And I don't know why my brain's kind of getting stuck on that right now, in the sense of what does that look like? Like if we were to talk to somebody or bring somebody on, like what are boundaries? What do those look like in this format? What does preparedness look like if the lens of how we record is through the dinner table? And I don't know that I have a clear answer for that. I kind of just like the feeling of just doing it.
I think it's good that you don't have a clear answer, because this is what I think Dennis was kind of getting at. What I'm going to post, I was working on a Twitter thread of like my favorite moments from talking to Bill Kinney, who we brought on, right?
Yeah.
And actually, instead of only having this lens of here's this awesome thing Bill said about logo design and branding, which he did say cool stuff about that.
Yeah, it's
One of the things I
incredible.
saw on it was I saw him giving me a compliment, and I saw how I was kind of like working to get into a place where I could receive it, because I don't like receiving compliments. And then I was like, even that is something that actually I would want to share with the people that follow me and the people that I'm friends with, because in real time on this video format, they can see me, and they can also see me like, hey, I'm uncomfortable receiving compliments and I'm uncomfortable posting them. And so I'm going to, and you can like watch me kind of like deal with this, because I want to get better at hearing these compliments. And so I bring them back to this other idea of like boundaries or whatever. There's something that's really nice, I think, and taking back to like authenticity of like on camera, you're practicing that language, even if it's like imperfect with a guest, just like you would be at the dinner table. And people can like see that, and it's not perfectly polished or performative. So I even think, we had somebody over at the apartment, like a bunch of people over at the apartment, but like somebody asked Kat and I how much the apartment was. And Kat and I were like talking about how like, anybody technically could like that knows us could like look up our apartment and probably figure out like how much it was, but it wasn't something that her and I were like interested in talking about as far as like the conversation of all of our friends and
Right.
everything. So we're not like super private about all these things. We're like open about it. We're like, it doesn't feel like that's anybody's business, and not in a, overly shitty way, but like in a, like, why would we talk about that type thing? But I'm not, or haven't been, very good in my life at being able to say no, right? I like to use humor to deflect a lot of things. And then I also like to, if I feel nervous or anxious, I like to just go ahead and give somebody whatever I think they want and appease, and I feel like everything's fine, and then later I don't feel good. And I was like, well, no, it's an opportunity to practice. So I practiced, and I remember I was like, what am I going to say? And I told them, I was like, oh, I'm not authorized to answer that. And then they like looked at me and they're like, authorized by who? And then I was like, by me. And then they didn't ask another question about the rent, right? And I remember being like, I'm practicing in real time doing these
Right.
things, and even on camera, like there's some element of doing that too,
100%.
Yeah.
It's funny that you framed it that way, because one of the things that I've been sort of asking myself lately is, and I don't remember where I heard this. It might have been on a podcast, or it might have been in a book that I was reading, but it's, what is the morality of the information that you seek? And looking at information through the lens of morals is always something, or at least now, is something that I've been really looking at, because I think in my younger life, like, I would look to find information so I could talk about things, right? And I can be like, look what I know. Like, it was just very
Same.
much like, almost like valid,
Same.
like, I really want people to think that I'm smart, because I
Hmm.
come from, it's just, I don't come from the background of academia. I don't come from that world. I grew up in kitchens. I, lived in apartments and trailers before we moved into our first home. So, like, there was always this like chip on my shoulder about that, to a degree. But if I take that and I look at it not just in that light, but in just in conversation, like why would they ask you that question? And I'm not trying to put them on blast or make them feel
No,
any,
no, no.
that's
Yeah.
not the goal of this, but it's more of like, when you go into a conversation with somebody, or we go into this podcast, I think one of the things that you said at the very beginning when we were talking to Nabras was, this is not a gotcha podcast. We're not looking to like grab a clip, put it out there, and be like, look at what this person said, like it or hate it. This is what they stand behind, or whatever.
Right.
And I love that, because it makes everything so much more free, and that weight is gone. And I guess my bigger question is, how do you do that in real life? How do you do that in real time? And how do you sort of take away the pressure and the barriers for good, authentic conversation, without these hiccups and without these, like, why do they need to know that? Like, what is the purpose of this question?
Yeah.
And I haven't stumbled upon an answer, but that's something that's been kicking around in my head. And I feel like we've had some guests on here that would be really good, and I would really be interested in their answers to that.
Same. Yeah. I think that's one element of season one, is who would be fun to bring back on and talk about completely different topics, because we really enjoyed our time with them. And I also, I think I say this for myself and for you, as somebody that's become a closer and closer friend from the time we started this to, now, is I think the fact that you're even kicking around the idea and stumbling, like wanting to stumble towards this idea of, boundaries, or how to like say or think about these things in real time, means that you're on the path. And I say that because I know that before I started practicing any of those things to get away from like kind of the coping mechanism of appeasement, people pleasing everybody around me all the time, before I was aware of it, I just did. And then I just didn't feel good later. But I just did. There was no think too much, right?
Yeah.
Only in the aftermath of not feeling right about it. And so the starting of thinking about it also means the starting of this. So many of the people that we brought on that are wonderful, of like being in your body, like thinking about how you feel about things, and you get to this place where that will eventually lead to slowing down time almost. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
you're in real time. Somebody says something, and instead of immediately just saying something, time just moves a little bit slower than it used to, because you've been like anyway. So that's my encouraging thought, but that I actually do believe is that you're already on that path, just like I'm on that path right now too. Does that make sense? Yeah, I think that
Yeah.
makes
I
sense.
mean, I think it has to be a journey with these things. I think if there was anything that was absolute about it, it would kind of take away any of the color. I think it'll just take away the fun. To be honest with you, I mean, I
Mm.
don't know of a better way to say it than that, but like it's definitely been over these 12 episodes. It's definitely been something that walking into these conversations without expectations is like, why am I not doing that with more things in my life? Like, why am I not holding everything to that same standard or to that same level of, carefreeness, if that's the right word? But
Joy,
yeah,
freedom, trust in a conversation. I mean, is there a greater testament to us to continue to do this? Because that was the idea, right? If anything, we do this for ourselves first, and then
yeah,
when it happens and we come away from it feeling fulfilled and feeling like more joy is in our life, there's going to be a waterfall effect to other parts of our life. It's so nice to hear you say that.
yeah. And I think there's been a ton of great stuff that's come from this, but I also think there has been, some negative things that have come from this. And I don't
Yo,
mean that in
talk
like
to
a
me.
big way, but I think there's a lot of stuff that goes into this, and I think there's a lot of, nervousness. There's a lot of like imposter syndrome type feeling, at least for me,
Mm,
before we started this. Like when I got the list, when we sent that first list out of, hey, these are the potential guests, this is who they are. And I read through, I think, like the first two of them. And then I was like, okay, I'm not reading this anymore because I got way, way into my head
oh
about it.
no.
And then I've kind of
Yeah.
like put myself on this thing of like, I'm the guy that's not going to do any prep on anybody. And I think that was sort of like me putting up a shield to like give myself a little bit of
Mm,
cover to not be, but I like what it created in this space. But I don't know that it came from a place of like pure curiosity. So
right.
that's caused a lot of reflection, which is good, but it started as something that I think was potentially negative. And even earlier, when you were talking about your former teacher, Pulitzer Prize winner, just got a new book, like I'm immediately in my head going like, am I qualified to talk to this person? Like 100%. Like the whole time you were
Yeah.
saying that, like I'm just like, hmm, like I'm excited, like 100%, let's talk. But the night before that podcast, I'm not sleeping. Like 100% not
Wow.
sleeping. Doesn't matter. And it's not for any other reason than that is just a huge accomplishment. And the fact that you have that in your network to bring to this space, I think not only is a testament to you in your networking and how you keep people in your orbit, but just like it just again reinforces the fact that I do agree with you 100%. I want to keep doing this, and it is
Yeah.
very fulfilling and very rewarding.
Yeah, I think so too. So I think this is good. Let's get through some of the pain moments, right? Because whereas I don't feel that way, right? I feel I feel well, it's it is about familiarity because that was my professor and I was a student. It's like I have a teacher-student relationship that was really healthy and really good. So I feel good about bringing this person on. But when you brought Eric Martino on and he was like incredibly accomplished person at very high levels, there is that like it does like can like if I'm not, I think familiarity is one of the key words here, right? I'm not familiar with this person. Immediately I'm like, oh, okay, all right, let me ease into this. Let me think about why I might be feeling a certain way. But for the most part, I think I've been really lucky that that's not something that messes with me, but then other things do, And I think on the fame or success level, this is an aside. It probably will show up in a podcast at some point if it hasn't already. But like going to Columbia's MFA program when I left, and people be like, "What are some of the biggest things you learned or whatever?" I always went back to one thing, and I still kind of go back to one thing. There's so much, but one was like I had professors that seemed miserable. They just didn't seem happy, and they were New York Times best-selling authors, right? Living in New York City, and they were teaching at Columbia at like an incredible program. And they were disappointed in how their first book did, or they were worried about if their current book was, going to sell as much as they need to sell, or they were not sure if people their editor really understood what was going on with the newest one, or whatever it is. And it was just like this, like self questioning and digging, and not all of them, right? But enough that I was kind of like, well, I thought that my whole like goal or North Star here would be like be a published famous author. And then after graduating, it was actually to never be in a place where I was miserable in spite of success, And I thought like it was really a big part of my journey of asking myself, why do I do any of the things I'm doing and what would I want? And then the biggest part is what would be enough? What do I think would be enough that I wouldn't be stressed out, anxious, tired all the time? What would be enough? And I really came to this feeling that like there's no room you could put me in with political world leaders or famous speakers or famous artists or anything that I'd ever look at the same. I'm sure I'd still be nervous. I'm sure there's still people that would make me blush. I'm not saying I'm like magically turned off from that, but I'm definitely different than when I was younger, that I feel like I have a more understanding that in any room and any person, there's just a human person. There's even just like a little kid that I'm sitting in front of, that I'm talking to. And also that everybody's going through something and not a lot of people are happy, even when they're incredibly accomplished. I know this is a crazy sidebar, but it was just making me think about how, I'm grateful that in some areas I've grown. And it also makes me feel grateful that you were willing to share that, like, you might get nervous the night before we interview somebody, that for me, I would just only feel like, excitement.
Yeah. It's, I think it's something that a lot of people maybe shy away from talking about, the challenging aspects of doing anything, specifically when it comes to a creative space. And, I typically don't talk about things that are challenging in creative spaces, but I don't talk about them because I don't want them to appear like there is obstacles in the way of people getting into that space, or that there is some sort of resistance to, or maybe like a level of difficulty that could be a deterrent for somebody to actually try. Whereas I think now my framing of that may be more towards, if we talk about these things and we say, hey, these are challenges in any space, that you shine light on them, you can probably open up a lot more doors, get people who have very different opinions, different takes, and different solutions on them. And that's something that I'm far more interested in now than I was before I started. I think before we started this, I was more interested in sort of protecting that within me and what I was comfortable with, as opposed to now, like, throw it all out there. Let's see what happens. I mean, we heard from not to continue to harp on the Pranab episode, but like when he was talking about like giving yourself the freedom and the ability to heal yourself, to take the time, that's not selfish, to be able to reframe things like that, for me in my personal life, has been huge. And then talking to Melody about everything that we were talking to her about, specifically when it came to like unfolding and learning about yourself, like,
Lithia.
yeah, that's not an easy thing to discuss.
No.
That's, you have to be vulnerable, you have to be open. And there are challenges to talking about things like that. There are things that can come out that maybe, you don't want to have out, you don't want to be discussing on a platform that's of any size. But I think when you do it and when you open it up and there's honesty around it and there's safety around it, I'm hopeful that that will open the door for more people to
Right.
participate.
Exactly.
And I think that's what I want out of this. If I was to say, like,
Same.
I'm not right. I think we're 100% aligned. Like, I'm not looking for downloads, clicks, likes, none of that. If it happens, great. But all that, I want that to be the byproducts. And what I really want to come out of this is like, how do I open up my mind? How do I open up my network? How do I find more people that I can connect with on different levels? And I think that we've done that with, I haven't met, I think the only person from the podcast that I've met out of your guests were, I don't think any of them actually.
In person?
Yeah, I don't think any of
Yeah, I
them.
don't think so. Yet.
Yet. Absolutely. That's the one thing, man. Like, if there was ever like this little thing going off in the back of my head, that's like, what would you want to have? Like, if this generated enough dollars in some
Yeah.
form or fashion to bring everybody together from season one into one room and one space, and to have this conversation around a meal, I
Boom.
would put every penny plus hundreds of my own dollars in that.
Same. Yeah, we've spoken into existence, and I think it'll naturally end up being a real thing that we do. Okay, so in the interest of other stuff too, I just did not. I felt I feel very conflicted about editing because on one level, I actually when I get into a flow state and I start getting into it, what I like about it is, we're recording this on Riverside. There's all these different places that you can record podcasts nowadays, right? And it has all these AI tools, and dude, they can be so frustrating because their job is to get rid of downtime. That's their job. And a lot of time the tools are not perfect, and so they increase the amount of time that you would have spent editing. So I'll share this with listeners as part of like our season 1 recap. Is like one small frustrating thing is that right now I'm talking, so when I go to clip this and I go, I want to share this with people, I can pick the video format. I'll be on top, you'll be down low or whatever. And if you start talking, it will switch to you. And, we might end up clipping this. So humor me and say anything about anything for 5 seconds.
Anything about anything for 5 seconds.
So it should have just switched to you and then switched back to me. That's really great. Except that I don't have manual controls to do that. So I have to depend that the AI does that for me. So I find a great clip of Pranav and the three of us all making jokes, and I publish it. Everything works before I hit export. I hit export, I go in, but nothing changes. So it's me as the big picture and Pranav under me. And then Pranav goes on for like 45 seconds of really beautiful stuff as this super small square underneath me. And I'm just like taking up the main thing, just kind of like nodding my head. It's these the little things, the little annoyances that I think are worth talking about. They would never be enough for me to not keep doing this. But I think it's nice, especially since we are not at a point where we've hired some intern or somebody to just do all of our editing, to kind of think about, hey, sometimes creating cool stuff that you want to share comes with these little lessons of having to learn all this stuff, learn Riverside, learn all the different formats that you need for all the different social medias, the different times that you need for them to be up, how to actually properly edit, how to find music that you can use that you won't get penalized for, even just listening through an audio podcast to make sure that everything's okay and that there isn't something you want to send to one of your guests to say, hey, this seems like a sensitive topic. Do we were in the middle of everything. Do you just want to double check? Is this something you feel like it was great to have between the three of us, but is this something you want published everywhere? Then that the uptime of actively listening and caring to something that you went and found guests, you hosted, you did the whole recording interview thing, you listen to it again to try to make sure everything's functionally working, you export it and hope that when it exports, janky shit doesn't happen, because sometimes just janky shit happens, Andrew, where an audio quality for some reason is wrong, and then I have to get customer service to respond to me in like 3 days, because I've even like literally taken it into GarageBand and manually changed the audio levels, and something with the raw recording is not right. Just all of these like weird little annoying side quests that I had to go through. And I would say now I feel way better because I learned some stuff and it feels like it's getting to a rhythm. And God knows these tools are going to get like so smart and they're going to get better and it's going to make it do what it's supposed to do, which is for there to be less time. But I like in the interest of like sharing the things behind the scenes that could just be frustrating, like for all the other creators out there too that do all their own stuff. I just want you to know I have so much more respect on the editing side of video and audio.
Dude, 100%.
That's my editing. That's the end of my editing speech.
No, but I think this is something that we need to discuss, and I love that we're doing this recap, and I'm glad that, not only are we doing this, but we're looking at it through the lens of like, let's just be open and honest. Like, I think if this was just something like, oh, let's just I just almost knocked over my entire setup. Like everything just about got completely ruined.
Which we'll keep in the pod.
Yeah, why not?
To the whole point of everything.
Yeah, but I think if we would have done this as like almost like a end of season recap trailer where we're just talking about highlights, like I don't know that I would have been that interested in doing it.
Thanks for listening, everybody. Here's my favorite moment from talking to Melody Song.
Yeah.
And playing the clip.
Yeah, no, hard pass. Hard pass. because I don't think that speaks true to what we've done. I don't think that's fair to our guests. I don't think that's fair to what you and I want to do creatively. And I don't think that's fair to what we're going to do to set up season 2 and what the
Yeah.
guests in season 2 are going to be like. Because if we're not learning from every episode, if we're not taking inventory after every one of these things, what's the point and why are we going to be in this position moving forward? And I don't think that I don't know. I feel like this is how we should be looking at it. It's almost like we're doing a post-mortem on season 1.
Yeah.
And it's just for everybody to hear. Like, what went right? What went wrong?
Yeah.
What do you want to do differently? What do we want to keep going?
To that point, do you have anything else too that you wanted to bring, like tension points, or maybe it wasn't burnout, but it felt similar, or anything from like the more raw side of any of it?
No, I mean, I think one thing I will say, and take this however you want to, but my respect for people in social media management is on a whole new level now, because I was certain by watching the people that I've worked with in the past use later and use all of these tools and build Facebook pages and social, like just all of it, that it was just going to be like point, click, drag, drop, everything's done. And maybe it gets to that point for me. But man, I mean, we sat at your kitchen island for what seemed like an hour.
We are two competent adults that thought, you'll come over, we'll set up some stuff on later, and we'll cook a steak together, and we'll like IG live us cooking a steak and tell all of our friends, hey, go check out the first episode. And we were stuck just trying to figure out the back end of later.
Yeah. And that to me is like, that's what I want to do more of. Like, I want to find, like, what are the 2 or 3, maybe 4 or 5 things next season that we get stuck on that we have to then go, okay, how do we solve this problem? What makes the most sense? What bandwidth do you have? What bandwidth do I have? Where does it overlap? And what can we do to ensure that this is smoother for the next season? And I think
on the positive, but no, sorry, go ahead and finish up that thought.
No, I was to say, because I think that way, it's like, to tie it back into like what makes sense to me is, if we're making a dish for service at a restaurant,
I like it.
the dish is good enough to be put on the menu, right? But that doesn't mean that we're done with that dish. Every time we put it out, we're going to find better ways to not only make that dish more efficient, but more delicious, and to make it maybe cost a little bit less money, or to make it more appealing to the guests. So it's like we're constantly fine tuning. And I think that's what I'm excited to continue to do, is what does this look like as we fine tune it? Because every episode I feel like we got better and better and better. And I'm super excited to see what this looks like.
I love when you give me restaurant. I love when you give me restaurant analogies.
Yeah. Well, maybe I do too much of it, but it's hard because that's been my entire life up until this point. So
please, no, give them all. I was going to say, so the positive thing I was going to share was, I think that you and I should be proud of ourselves in the way that we communicated our feeling of, are we doing too much? Are we doing, is one person feeling like they're carrying too much weight? And I say that because I've had, I don't know, 7 or 8 co-founders or something in my life now. Feels like that, maybe 6. I've gone through so many different elements of this exact thing where people are partnering on something. And it took me until I was in my 30s, to start to realize, oh man, and Eric Martino said this, that like being clear is kind. Like, you have to take responsibility for yourself and how you're feeling, and then you have to communicate it to somebody else. If you're both responsible for something, it is not okay to just be like, don't worry, Andrew, I'll take care of everything, and then I won't tell you that I have a very, very low level of resentment because I'm terrified to share that, because I don't think, like, whatever my own internal shit is about the situation, like, no, I have to do more or else I'm not a good enough and this isn't worthy of doing. But then later my mind feels it, and then I can't help but be passive aggressive. And I feel like we did a good job where you asked multiple times, and then I didn't just immediately go into like, oh, no, it's okay, it's fine. I was like, yeah, let me think about it, maybe let me sleep on it, let me get back to you. Right. And then I came back to you and I was like, hey, I mean, God, the idea of doing all the social media stuff isn't super interesting to me. And if you're willing to look into that, that will be great. But also, I think I'm okay with editing. Like, I don't I'm not hitting burnout, and I know what burnout feels like. But if I hit it, I do want to know that I could come and tell you, like, hey man, I'm just feeling a little burnt out on editing. And I'd say that's the thing I'm proud of us for. And I don't know how you feel, but on my end, I feel like so far in the early part of our partnership, I could say the thing of like, hey man, I'm just kind of tired, or hey, I don't feel like I can do this right now. We might need to hire somebody, or can you step in and do this? And I'm not feeling scared, which I know might seem silly for somebody to watch, be like, why would you be scared of that? But for the other people, they'll watch me saying this and they'll know exactly what I'm talking about, which is that I've had that in the past where I felt like I had to do so much and not admit if I didn't feel like I wanted to do something, or just be afraid to be like direct and clear about the different responsibilities there can be, because it's more than you would think when you say we're going to interview like 12 people on a computer. It
Yeah.
sounds pretty chill, man. It's a lot of hours to shape all that and then to get it published on all the right places and to share pieces of it that you think are really resonant.
Yeah. It's a much bigger undertaking than I think I initially thought. But to your point, it still has not hit any point where I would say, I don't want this or it's not worth it. Right now the juice is definitely worth the squeeze, and my
Yeah.
cup is empty and I'm ready to fill it back up.
So some more behind the scenes stuff then too on this. Like I found that I like to do a first, like my listen of a podcast to go through and make sure audio turned out okay and everything's all right while I'm just doing errands around the house. So I'll have my laptop open and I'll have my like Notion open, so that any point I'm like cleaning, I'm doing dishes, I'm whatever I can, things I've been resisting, I will do and listen. And then when like certain moments or certain stories happen, like, hey, you know, Bill is doing this really great story about, this beautiful branding thing. I'm just going to put the minute marker in, and then I like type it in there, and I go back to cleaning while like really intentionally listening. So has there any been things like that with like how much you drive for work, or with
Yeah.
some other element of times where you've been trying to figure out how do you slide in some of this stuff amidst your other, like, your like full-time life job?
Well, I think it's kind of funny, like how easily it has integrated into my life because I have a
Mhm.
lot of windshield time. I have a ton of airplane time. And I have, every time you've sent me an edited episode, I've downloaded it and I'll listen to it on my drive to work, which if I'm going to Kentucky, it's an hour and a half and I can pretty much hammer out an entire episode. Or I'm listening to it on the plane and I'm taking notes and I'm going through it. But you know, it's it's amazing in the sense of there's so much that we talk about in these episodes that I don't know that I fully grasp during the recording, that when I go back and listen to it the first or second time, there's so much more that I get out of it. And there's
Yeah.
so much more fuel that kind of sticks with me to like let that curiosity burn on that topic. And I've just been endlessly fascinated. Like if you told me, hey, season 2 is going to be every single person that we did in season 1, the second episode,
Again.
I would be down. Like I feel there's so much more that we could have gotten out of those conversations.
There's also a really interesting creative challenge there, right? And a creative idea there of saying this is not about maxing and featuring as many people as possible. Instead, what happens if you take a second look at the same person and see where the conversation goes this time? That's interesting. I'm going to sleep on that. Even now, the producer mind in me is going in real time. And I'm even like, I'm pulling up my Notion right now to see what else I could share about season 1 that's interesting to me. And I have, when I first started, I had outfits worn. So I had a little tab to be like, what outfits have I worn? So I'm not always wearing the same thing. I don't think I've updated that in the last 2 or 3 episodes, which I kind of like am glad that I let that go. That's like a
Yeah.
thing. I was like, I will be really smart about what I'm wearing. This one I really like. I have a one that's just for anecdotes told, stories told in the pod. And I like that for multiple reasons. One, it is actually, I think, for a person that's never done a podcast, I actually think it's very challenging to do multiple interviews and series of things and not end up telling some of the same stories or same versions of stories. And then at first I was like, I want to create a folder where I track all these stories, because I don't want to just say the same thing over again. As somebody just listens, like Charley only ever talks about this one story with his nephew or whatever, right? So I
Right.
was thinking about the audience, the way it was received, and not wanting to do the same thing over again. And then I went into a place where I was like, actually, this is really good, because this could end up being a book that I want to write. This could end up being like, if I keep collecting my favorite anecdotes from this, it's almost like I'm collecting all the things that sometimes I forget. But when you're in natural conversation, they come back to you. And you go, shit, that's a really good story. And that's a big part of my life journey, and I want to collect it. And then finally, one of the places I land with it that I'm glad that I'm doing it is that I'm even losing the thread on it right now, which is even more to the point of this episode. I liked that I wanted to avoid, that I didn't mind so much avoiding it, because now I was thinking, like, not everybody's going to listen to every episode, and somebody might be able to hear that story because they listened to this one, and that I don't have to be so perfectionist or so controlling on, hey, I've already told that story, don't tell that story again in another podcast. So I kind of came like full circle.
Yeah.
And these are just like little, these are just
No, but
other little pieces that I think are fun to know, you know?
I love that, because to me, when you were saying that, I immediately went to like, you wouldn't and I would never censor myself at a dinner table. So why
Right.
would we do that here? Why would we take an anecdote that we think fits so perfectly? We feel it, we want to say it, and then look at a sheet of paper and go, can't use that one, already used it. So I love that you said that, because I've struggled
But
with
you
that. And I
just,
mean,
you understand
100%.
the impulse of where it started.
100%. Because that, I mean, to the point that you made about the outfits, like I was like, I'm never going to wear the same hat. So like, I don't think I wore the same hat in any of these episodes. The
Oh,
only
that's
thing that I've
amazing.
done, which I didn't do on this one, is the Fozzie Bear mug that I drank water out of. Like I was
Hey,
like, this is going to be like my like nod to late night TV, and
I
like
love
every
that.
guest has a coffee mug type situation. But
By the way, that's a
um,
difference too, the mug. So that would be a different thing. In the first couple episodes, I would get some type of audio feedback from myself, from you, or from a guest, and then I'd be very, very much focused on fixing it in post, or then trying to figure out how I could, as a producer, mess with that afterwards, right?
yeah,
Like, hey, I'll just tell Andrew, hey, when you drink your water, be really careful for how close you are to the mic when you drink it, or when you put it back down, right? And
yep,
then as we got through it, I realized that is good advice for certain delivery systems. It's not one that we have to worry about, unless it's like consistent and it's happening all the time. To have
right,
these little touches of life and imperfection and hearing something is okay. We're not producing a live 4-hour radio show where,
right,
somebody doesn't realize that their water bottle is right next to the mic the whole time or something. So that was one of the changes that I'm kind of grateful to. I think I had a lot of that energy at the very beginning of, like, we need perfectly clean audio, and even in the
yeah.
first couple episodes, the audio matches off because I didn't know what I was doing, and that frustrated me so much. And I was like, man, did I ruin the Pranab episode? And now that, like, I shared clip stuff, I'm like, I didn't ruin it's okay that it's
No.
not perfect audio.
Yeah, but I don't know that, and this just may be a testament to that conversation, but I don't know that if the audio was at 20% the quality, that it could have ruined that conversation. I mean,
Right. Oh, yeah.
that like and this may be a little cheesy, but I am looking forward to the day where I could sit down and just like have a conversation with Pranab, drink a boba tea, which I'm not a fan of, and just listen to him walk me through that entire process again. Like I want that to happen in real time. I think it would be not just fun, but just a cool like journey to the cup type situation that I really want to do.
Yeah. What's other stuff that we love about Pranav that I can throw in here so I can surprise him with a clip out of nowhere with no context of just the two of us talking up about him.
Man, there was so
He
much.
he is uniquely gifted at connecting people. We've talked about that before, but that Mexico City trip I went on, which is this incredible trip with a large group of friends, he was kind of at the center of so many connecting points. And he is just so genuine, and I'm being really careful to think about what I think present. It's got to be one of the most present people I know. And then you go back and you edit clips and you realize who's really eloquent and pretty great about how they can explain and teach, comparatively to others. And he does have, I think, a gift for teaching topics that you and I both had not much familiarity to at
None.
all. So this is us loving up on Pranav. And then
And
I'm
I
going
mean,
to look
he's
at the
also
camera and I'm
like
going to send this to you via text message probably. And you're going to laugh, especially at this moment. So
100%. I'm excited to see it.
I've gone through, I think, the things that I wanted to mostly talk about, which was like casual, open. Some stuff's harder than you think it is, but I don't feel even anywhere near burnout. I feel excited to do more of these. I think, what else could the only last thing I can think of is like the fact that we don't have it all perfectly figured out on like how many are we going to post of each person and on what days are we going to post, and maybe we'll start to figure some of that stuff out in the next, like you said, the next couple of weeks when life is slowing down for you. Maybe we'll come up with some type of system where it's not overly stringent, but it allows for some, like right now I'm like, oh, it's Saturday, we could just go on and throw, I have a draft of you and Pranav having a great thing that should just be live. Should that just be live, or is it smart to actually say like it's 3 times a week on these days, and that way we get through all Pranavs and then we get to Bill's, or wait, maybe it could be Pranav and then it could be Bill and then it could be Mel, or maybe it could be whatever. But like being able to say that stuff, I think, is helpful for somebody listening to realize like how jumbled and kind of just living and figuring it out naturally in real time it is, that it's not, you don't have to have everything perfectly solved. Do you know what I mean? But that's I think about even stuff on that level, which I know from being a chef and being in a kitchen, like these minute levels of like, well, maybe I shouldn't just post. Maybe we should have a whole system for how we post. Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I think we should just do what feels right. I mean, if you're editing and you get struck by something that was in the Astrid episode or in the Jared and Kylie episode, and you just go,
I want this to live. I want this to go. Boom.
It. Let's go.
Yeah.
Because
that's talking about this in real time.
Yeah, because I think that is something that speaks to the humanity of this podcast and what we're trying to do. It's not this regimented thing. It's not this highly structured, everything has to be ABC 1, 2, 3. This is just us. And
no sponsors, no huge audience base. You and me doing something that we're passionate about, and we think it makes the world a little bit more positive and interesting. So let's just do things the way we want to do them.
100%.
Yeah.
Screw analytics.
I love that. I love it. What else? Is there anything else you wanted to bring up or talk about? I feel like this was I'm really glad that you were down to do this. And shout out again to Dennis. If you end up watching this, this is partly because of you, my dude.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm really happy with everything that we've done and where we're at and where we're headed. I think it's going to be something that I continue to look forward to. I think it's very fulfilling. It's one of those things that I found myself longing for over the last 6 weeks, is like, when's the next time we're going to have a conversation?
Yeah.
So I can't wait to get into season 2. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how that's shaping up.
That's the best way to end it. The best way to end the conversation is for us to like just think out loud casually. Even if it's only 30 seconds of what kind of guest or who we might want to bring on. I know I would love to bring Eliza on. I know that I like your idea a lot of reaching out maybe to even some people that have already been on and having them on again. But maybe it doesn't even have to be a person that you have in your head, but what kind of conversations or what kind of, I'll give you an example. I really want to have a conversation about fantasy football, and not in the way that you would think. Well, probably in the way that you would think. You know me well enough by now. I want to have about how I think fantasy football creates a model for real community tied to something we consume, right? Because a lot of like consuming things is like very much like we're just audience members. But fantasy football can create a place where people are texting each other, going to watch something together, keeping each other in each other's lives because of this arbitrary consumption-based thing. And I think that's like a conversation I'd want to open up more with other people who are also passionate about the community side of something that mostly Only Giver kind of gets talked about in a gambling side. So that's mine. Right. I'm gonna I'm hoping for that in season 2, a fantasy football pod.
I'd be behind that. I mean, you got me into fantasy football, so
That's right.
I'm definitely game to go down that path. I think something that, and I don't know if this maybe lands in the podcast world, but something that I've been deeply curious about and that I've been, haven't quite jumped in yet, which I feel that it's going to happen very soon, is there's this big thing that's been happening where, and I think it happens a lot, but like you and I can read the same book and walk away with two completely different takes. We can watch the same clip, we can eat the same food, we can do all of these things and immediately have completely opposite reactions, completely opposite understandings of. And I don't know the best way to say what I'm trying to do, but it's like I think that the through line is how we were brought up, how we were raised, and how open we are and open-minded we are about certain things that shape our reactions. And I've seen that now in some things that I've been doing that I would not have looked at this way had I not done things when I was a kid that I had done. And there's been a couple weird things that have happened in my life over the past couple of weeks that I'll talk to you about offline, and I'll bring it back to this during next season. But I really want to understand like what shapes somebody's opinion on something. Whether I'm not talking like hot topic issues, I don't want to talk politics, religion, any of that stuff, but just in general, like what shapes your taste, your reaction to certain things, and how you receive information, be that from a video, from a book, from a conversation. And I don't
love
know
it.
what that.
I'm in. No, that's a solid idea, dude.
But I don't know what that's
think
called,
about, like,
and it's bothering me. Like,
I bet there's probably some. We'll see if we can't find a phrase. We'll make it up. But when I got into my MFA program because of my high school that your wife and I went to, our library was like a small room in the church, and it had like devotionals. It had like the Left Behind series. Obviously, had a lot of versions of the Bible. And it wasn't allowed to have, Virginia Woolf, for example, right? And when I got to the MFA program and I'm reading like a classic, like that's not very offensive at all, by Virginia Woolf for the first time as like a 28-year-old, and my mind is like melting, and I'm thinking about how beautiful and how powerful I'm finding some of the things I'm reading. My first like sadness was like, I'll never really get to know what the difference would have been of reading this at 16 and reading this now. And I've always kind of thought about it in a more positive way, thinking about like the way we change and the way we interact with art, and what that reveals, or what we couldn't see before. Now we absolutely see. There's absolutely something there.
let's do that.
Okay.
Oh,
I think it'd
man.
be fun to actually think about the art forms, like each bring in art forms, even have a guest and say, hey, this is what we want to do it on. We think you'd be good for this, but you need to bring a few pieces of art or stories of interactions with art where you see this thing happening, and we can talk about why and what reveals itself. All right, well, cool. We got 2 pods. We have 3 pods, really. We got 3 pods set up. A former teacher who we think is brilliant, and fantasy football conversation that I think is more than what people see on the surface. And then something really beautiful about how we change, and then what we're able to see and pull from art. It's going to be good season 2, dude. Well, hey, toast to you. I don't have anything, but cheers to us for doing season 1 and doing like an open recap where we just kind of talk about all the different parts of it. And I'm just going to keep posting. Rich's episode came out this past week. Next week, Eric Martino's episode will come out. I'll send you Eric Martino so you can listen to it. Then maybe 1 or 2 more after that. And we'll start recording for season 2, I would imagine, in the next few weeks.
Super excited. Can't wait.
I love you, dude. I'm going to go ahead and I'll hit stop. And then normally what happens after I hit stop is Andrew and I are still here, and we might talk for another minute or 2 and then hang up. So this was the ultimate, unplugged BTS pod. So thanks for listening.